My name is Alex, and at 25, I thought I knew what the rhythm of my life was going to be: ordinary, steady, and quietly predictable. I wasn't the kind of person who expected sudden turns of fate. I lived with my family, helped around the house, and looked after my younger sister, who was preparing to become a mother. Most days blurred into each other, waking up early, running errands, and silently carrying the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. But everything began to change the night my sister went into labor. She had been restless for days, her due date drawing closer, but none of us were prepared for the panic that hit when she suddenly doubled over in pain. My mother's hands trembled as she tried to comfort her, and my father fumbled with his phone, trying to get hold of the nearest clinic. It was me who finally steadied everyone and said we needed to take her immediately to Dr. Olivia's clinic, a place I had only heard of but never visited. The clinic was quiet when we arrived, almost too calm for the chaos we were feeling. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, and the faint hum of machines echoed through the hallway. Then she appeared, Dr. Olivia. She walked toward us with a kind of calm authority that instantly shifted the atmosphere. She was 35, though the lines of maturity around her eyes gave her a presence that felt timeless. She carried herself with a quiet grace, and yet there was a warmth in her eyes that softened the clinical white coat she wore. For the first time that night, I felt the knot of fear in my chest loosen. "Don't worry," she said in a steady, soothing tone as she helped my sister onto a stretcher. "She's in safe hands now." Those words were simple, but I believed them. Something about her voice carried a reassurance that reached straight into me, as if she wasn't only speaking to my sister, but to me as well. The next hours passed in a blur. My sister's cries echoed down the sterile corridor, while nurses hurried back and forth, following Dr. Olivia's instructions. I sat in the waiting room, hands clasped tightly in prayer, listening to every sound with my heart racing. Occasionally, the door to the delivery room would open, and Dr. Olivia would step out. She didn't have to, but every time she caught my eye, she would give a small nod or a quiet smile, as if reminding me to breathe. I didn't know her, and yet, in that moment, her presence anchored me. When the delivery was finally over, and I heard the first cries of my newborn niece, relief washed over me like a tide. My sister was safe, the baby was healthy, and Dr. Olivia walked out with a faint glow of triumph in her expression. She congratulated my family, then turned her gaze toward me. "You must be Alex, right?" Her voice caught me off guard. Of all the people in the room, she remembered my name from when we had rushed in earlier. I nodded, and she smiled, one of those rare smiles that seemed to light her whole face. "You were very strong for your sister," she said gently. "Not everyone holds themselves together in such moments." Her words touched something deep inside me. I wasn't used to being noticed like that. Most of my life had been about blending into the background, supporting others, making sure things kept moving. Yet here she was, acknowledging me, seeing me. Over the next few hours, as my sister recovered, I kept catching glimpses of Dr. Olivia. She moved gracefully between patients, always calm, always composed, but whenever her gaze happened to land on me, it lingered for just a second too long. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that I was simply reading too much into small gestures. But there was something undeniable about the way she would pause, the way her expression softened whenever our eyes met. Late that night, after the baby was settled and my parents had dozed off in the waiting area, I stepped out into the hallway for some air. The clinic was quiet, the fluorescent lights humming softly. And there she was again, walking down the hall with a chart in her hands. "You should rest," she said when she saw me. "It's been a long day." "I can't," I admitted honestly. "Every time I close my eyes, I keep hearing my sister's cries." She stopped, looked at me for a moment, then placed the chart under her arm. "You know, sometimes the ones who hold everything together forget they are human too. You need to allow yourself to breathe, Alex. The way she said my name, it lingered, almost like a secret. That was the first night I realized Dr. Olivia wasn't just a doctor doing her job. She had this rare ability to reach past the surface and touch something deeper, something I didn't even know was waiting to be seen. And though I couldn't name the feeling yet, I knew this meeting was the beginning of a change I could never undo. The morning after my niece was born, the whole clinic seemed calmer. My sister was resting peacefully, the baby bundled in a blanket beside her, while my parents whispered prayers of gratitude. For the first time in hours, I let myself exhale. But even in the quiet, I couldn't stop noticing how every detail of the room, the soft beeping of the monitor, the distant footsteps of nurses, felt tethered to the presence of Dr. Olivia. She checked in on my sister regularly, her confidence radiating through every gesture, but she always seemed to look for me. Sometimes it was a passing glance, other times a pause where her eyes lingered longer than necessary, like she wanted to say something but held back. On the second day, as I sat by the window feeding my niece, Dr. Olivia appeared at the door. She had a file in her hand, but her expression wasn't professional, it was softer, more personal. "Alex," she said gently, "would you come with me for a moment?" I looked at my mother, who nodded, and followed her down the hall. My footsteps echoed quietly against the polished floor, and my heart thudded a little louder than usual. She led me into her office, a modest room filled with neatly stacked books, a pot of lavender on the shelf, and certificates hanging on the wall. It smelled faintly of vanilla, and for a moment, I forgot I was in a clinic. "Please sit," she said, motioning to a chair opposite her desk. I hesitated. "Is everything okay with my sister?" Her lips curved into a reassuring smile. "Yes, everything is perfectly fine. She and the baby are healthy. I just thought, you've been so quiet these past 2 days. You must be exhausted. I wanted to see how you're holding up." The kindness in her voice disarmed me. I had expected a routine update about my sister, not this gentle concern for me. "I'm okay," I said softly. "I guess I'm just trying to take it all in." She leaned back slightly, studying me with those thoughtful eyes. "You remind me of myself, when I was younger. Always holding everything together for everyone else, but never stopping to think about what I wanted." I blinked, unsure how to respond. "You?" "Yes," she said, a wistful note creeping into her tone. "I wasn't always this confident, you know. When I was your age, I felt lost most of the time. My parents wanted me to marry young, but I had this dream of becoming a doctor. I used to sneak into the library and read about medicine for hours. People laughed at me when I told them. But here I am." Her words struck me deeply. I had never thought of a doctor, especially one as composed as her, feeling lost or unsure. "That must have taken a lot of courage," I murmured. She smiled faintly. "Courage, or stubbornness? Maybe both. But I knew I wanted to spend my life helping women. Pregnancy, childbirth, these are such powerful yet vulnerable moments. I didn't want anyone to feel alone in them." There was a pause, and I found myself speaking before I could stop. "I don't really know what I want. Everyone else seems to have a path, but me. I just go where life pushes me." Her eyes softened, and for a moment it felt like she could see right through me. "That's not weakness, Alex. Sometimes not knowing means you're still open to possibilities. People like that often end up exactly where they are meant to be." Something about her words lodged itself in my heart. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that, like my uncertainty wasn't a failure, but something that carried meaning. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me about the loneliness that came with her career, the long nights at the hospital, the times she wished she had someone waiting at home. She laughed as she recalled her childhood, when she would line up her dolls and pretend to give them checkups. And she listened when I spoke too, never interrupting, never dismissing me. It was strange. I had just met her, yet the comfort I felt sitting across from her was something I had never felt even with people I'd known for years. It was as if she wasn't just hearing my words, but understanding the spaces between them. When I finally returned to my sister's room, my mother looked up curiously. "What did the doctor want?" "Nothing important," I said quickly, though inside I knew it had been more important than I could explain. On the third day, it happened again. She found me sitting in the waiting area with a cup of tea, and she gestured for me to follow her. This time, she didn't take me to her office, but to a small garden tucked at the back of the clinic. It was quiet, with a few benches and a row of blooming jasmine plants. "I come here when things get overwhelming," she said, sitting down on the bench. "Sometimes the walls of this place feel too heavy." I sat beside her, inhaling the sweet scent of jasmine. "It's beautiful," I admitted. She glanced at me, a small smile playing on her lips. "So are you, when you're not carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Heat rushed to my face, and I looked away quickly, unsure how to respond. She didn't seem to notice my flustered silence, or maybe she did, but chose not to press. Instead, she leaned back, her gaze fixed on the flowers swaying gently in the breeze. "You have kind eyes," she said softly after a moment. "The kind that see more than most people realize." Nobody had ever told me something like that before. And as her words sank in, I realized that this was more than casual kindness. She wasn't just a doctor checking on a patient's family, she was seeing me, reaching for me in a way that felt unexplainable. Those 3 days at the clinic blurred together like a dream, filled with stolen conversations, shared silences, and the unspoken bond forming between us. She never said anything outright, and neither did I, but every glance, every pause, carried something unspoken. By the time my sister was discharged, I should have been eager to leave, to return home and resume my ordinary life. But as we packed our bags and prepared to go, a strange heaviness settled over me. I didn't want to walk away from this place, from her. And though I didn't know it yet, those 3 days had already planted the seeds of something that would change my life forever. By the third day, the clinic no longer felt like a place of strangers. It had become strangely familiar, almost like a second home, though I couldn't explain why. My sister was recovering well, my niece was healthy and crying strong, and everyone seemed to be breathing easier. Yet, instead of feeling relief that we were leaving soon, I felt an ache building inside me. It wasn't about the clinic, it was about her. That morning, I was sitting near the window, folding some of my sister's clothes when Dr. Olivia walked in. She carried her usual files, but her expression wasn't the brisk, professional one I had grown used to. Instead, there was a softness in her eyes, a hesitation, as though she had been rehearsing something. "Alex," she said after greeting my family, "could I speak to you for a moment?" I followed her out, my heart beating a little faster than it should have. She led me back to her office, the room that now felt oddly comforting with its lavender plant and shelves of books. She closed the door gently, and for a second, I thought she might share some difficult medical news. Instead, she looked straight at me, her hands folded neatly on the desk. "I've been thinking," she began carefully. "What are you doing with your life right now? Do you have a job, or plans?" The question startled me. Nobody really asked me things like that, not seriously. Not really, I admitted, shifting uncomfortably. "I just help my family, take care of things at home. I don't have a degree or any special skills." She tilted her head, studying me in that way she often did, as if she was searching beneath the surface. Then she smiled faintly, her eyes warm. "Why don't you come work with me?" I blinked at her, sure I had misheard. "Work with you? But I just told you, I don't have a degree." "That doesn't matter," she said firmly, leaning forward slightly. "I don't need another doctor. I need someone I can trust, someone reliable by my side. You could be my PA. You'd learn quickly, I can see that in you." I stared at her, words caught in my throat. The offer felt surreal. Me working here. With her. A part of me wanted to say yes instantly, but another part hesitated. I don't know if I'd be good enough. She smiled again, but this time it was softer, almost tender. You already are. Alex, you've been here only a few days, and I've watched the way you carry yourself. You're steady when others panic, gentle when someone needs care, and you notice details most people ignore. Those are qualities you can't teach, they are rare. And I trust them. The sincerity in her voice wrapped around me like a blanket. No one had ever spoken to me like that, not with such belief, not with such certainty. I felt my throat tighten, but I managed a shaky laugh. You make it sound like I'm more capable than I really am. You are, she said simply. You just don't see it yet. I didn't know what to say. The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken things I couldn't name. Finally, I nodded slowly. I'll think about it. Her eyes softened, as if that was enough. That's all I ask. When I returned to my sister's room, my mind was a storm of thoughts. I should have been focused on the fact that she was being discharged soon, but all I could think about was Dr. Olivia's voice, her words echoing inside me. I need someone I can trust. That evening, when we reached home, my family gathered around to hear about the experience. Between laughter and relief, I finally told them about the offer. Dr. Olivia asked if I wanted to work with her, as her PA. For a moment, there was silence. Then my mother's eyes widened in surprise. Really? At her clinic? Yes, I said, hesitantly. My father leaned back, nodding slowly. That's a respectable place. Good people. If she thinks you're capable, then maybe it's an opportunity you shouldn't waste. Even my sister, still weak from the delivery, managed a smile. You should do it, Alex. It suits you more than staying idle at home. Their encouragement should have been the final push, but deep inside I knew my reasons for wanting to accept weren't just practical. It wasn't just about a salary, or a respectable job. It was about her, the way she looked at me as though I mattered, the way her words lit something inside me I hadn't felt before. That night, lying awake in bed, I replayed every moment of the past 3 days. Her smile in the hallway, the garden where she told me I had kind eyes, the office where she leaned forward and said she trusted me. My chest tightened at the thought of never seeing her again, of letting this fragile, unspoken connection dissolve into memory. I realized then that my answer had already formed long before I said it aloud. I didn't just want the job. I wanted her presence in my life. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed the clinic number. When the receptionist answered, I asked to be transferred to Dr. Olivia. My hands shook as I waited, but when her calm voice came on the line, my nerves melted. Dr. Olivia. I said softly. Yes, Alex. I swallowed hard, then smiled despite myself. I'd like to accept your offer. I want to work with you. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a gentle laugh that seemed to warm me through the receiver. I'm glad, she said simply. You won't regret it. And in that moment, I knew I wouldn't. Starting my new life at the clinic felt like stepping into a world that didn't quite belong to me, but somehow welcomed me anyway. On my first day as Dr. Olivia's PA, I felt nervous, my palms damp, as I walked through the familiar corridors. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to live up to her faith in me, but when she greeted me with that warm, reassuring smile, something inside me calmed. Don't worry, she said softly, handing me a clipboard. You'll learn as you go. I'll guide you. And she did. The first weeks were filled with small lessons, how to organize files, schedule appointments, handle calls, and manage patient records. None of it was glamorous, but Olivia treated every task like it mattered, and she never made me feel foolish when I stumbled. Once, I mixed up 2 phone messages, panicking when I realized my mistake. But instead of scolding me, she placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Mistakes are proof you're trying. You'll do better next time, I know you will." It was such a simple thing, but to me, it meant everything. Every day I worked beside her, I saw a different side of Dr. Olivia. She wasn't just the poised, confident doctor everyone respected. She was also someone who stayed late after hours, exhausted yet unwilling to leave until she knew every patient was cared for. She was someone who carried her own quiet burdens, though she never spoke of them unless she trusted the person listening. And somehow, I became that person. One evening, after the clinic had emptied and the sky outside was painted in streaks of orange and violet, we sat in her office finishing paperwork. I noticed her rubbing her temples, her face pale with fatigue. "You should rest," I said. She chuckled lightly. "Says the girl who hasn't lifted her eyes from the files for the past 2 hours. I smiled, but my concern lingered. "Still, you work too hard." She leaned back in her chair, exhaling softly. "It's not just work, Alex. Sometimes it feels like this clinic is all I have. It fills the silence that waits for me when I go home." Her words hung heavy in the air. I didn't know what to say at first, but I heard myself whisper, "That sounds lonely." Her eyes met mine then, raw and unguarded. "It is?" That was the night she told me things she hadn't told anyone. About how she had chosen her career over traditional expectations, how it meant losing people along the way. Friends drifted away, family judged her for not settling down, and though she never regretted becoming a doctor, she often wondered if the cost was too high. Listening to her, I felt something stir deep inside me, an ache, a tenderness I couldn't quite name. She wasn't just my boss anymore. She was a woman with her own wounds, trusting me enough to show them. And as the days passed, those moments became more frequent. Sometimes it was in the small things. The way her eyes softened when she caught me laughing with a nurse, the way she praised me when I learned something new, the way she lingered a second longer than necessary when handing me a folder. Other times, it was in the quiet conversations we shared after the clinic closed, sitting in her office with cups of tea. "You have a way of bringing light into a room, Alex," she said once, watching me curiously. "Do you know that?" I shook my head, embarrassed. "I think you give me too much credit." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "I don't give credit where it isn't earned." Moments like that made my heart race in ways I couldn't control. I found myself looking forward to work, not because of the tasks, but because it meant seeing her, hearing her voice, feeling that unspoken connection. She had become the center of my days, and when I went home at night, I missed her presence more than I wanted to admit. But with the warmth came conflict. Sometimes, in the quiet of my room, I wondered if I was imagining it all. Maybe she was just being kind, maybe her compliments and long talks were nothing more than gestures of a generous mentor. Maybe I was reading too much into the way her eyes lingered on mine. Still, there were moments that told me I wasn't imagining everything. Like the time she reached for a file on the shelf and her hand brushed mine, just a second of contact, but enough to send a tremor through me. Or the way she sometimes paused in the middle of speaking, her gaze fixed on me as though she'd lost her train of thought. It was subtle, unspoken, but it was there. One night, as we were closing the clinic, I asked her quietly, "Why did you choose me, Olivia? You could have hired anyone with more experience, more qualifications." She looked at me, her eyes serious. "Because I saw something in you that I didn't see in anyone else." "What was it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled softly. "A heart I could trust." Her words stayed with me long after I left the clinic that night, echoing in my mind as I lay awake in bed. She was more than my boss. She was becoming my world, and I didn't know how to stop it, or if I even wanted to. I found myself caught between certainty and doubt, torn between the reality of our roles and the possibility of something more. Was I just a trusted assistant, or was I something else entirely in her eyes? The questions haunted me, but beneath them all was a quiet truth I couldn't deny. Being near her made me feel alive in a way I had never felt before. And whatever this bond was, imagined or real, it had already taken root deep inside me. The clinic was unusually quiet that night. The last patient had left hours ago, and the distant hum of the city outside was softened by the thick glass windows. I was finishing some files when I noticed Olivia standing by her desk, unusually still, her eyes fixed on the papers in her hands though she wasn't reading them. Something about her silence made me pause. "Olivia?" I asked softly. She looked up, and for a moment, I thought I saw a war inside her, hesitation, fear, and something even deeper. She set the papers aside and walked closer, her steps measured, almost hesitant. "Alex," she said, her voice quiet, fragile in a way I had never heard before. "There's something I've been holding back. I need to tell you." My heart thudded in my chest. "What is it?" She exhaled, her fingers brushing nervously against the edge of the desk. "When I asked you to work here, it wasn't only because I needed help. The truth is, I wanted you close. Because I care for you more than I should." For a second, the world stopped. Her words echoed inside me, wrapping around every doubt, every restless night I had spent wondering if I was imagining things. Relief, joy, and fear collided all at once, stealing my breath. "You care for me?" I whispered, almost afraid the moment would vanish if I said it too loudly. Her gaze held mine, steady and vulnerable. "Yes. More than I ever intended. More than I ever thought I could again." My hands trembled against the folder I was holding. "Olivia. I thought it was just me. I thought I was imagining everything. But my voice broke with the weight of my own truth. I feel the same. I care about you too. So much that it scares me." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was freeing. It was as if both of us had been holding our breath for months and finally exhaled together. Olivia's lips curved into a small, almost disbelieving smile. "Do you know how many times I wanted to tell you? And every time, I stopped myself because I thought I'd lose you. And I kept wondering if you'd ever see me as more than just your assistant," I admitted, a nervous laugh escaping me. Turns out we were both afraid of the same thing. That night, something shifted between us, not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the gentle way we allowed ourselves to simply be honest. No walls, no masks, no pretense. From then on, our days carried a different kind of warmth. We didn't label anything, didn't announce it to the world. It was ours alone, a quiet love that blossomed in the spaces between our daily routines. We began sharing lunches, not just for convenience, but for the joy of sitting together, unhurried, talking about everything from patient stories to favorite childhood books. She told me about the first time she stitched a wound on her own, her hands shaking but her heart steady. I told her about how I used to dream of traveling the world, though I never found the courage to start. Sometimes, when the clinic emptied and the night wrapped around us, we would take slow walks outside, her pace always adjusting to mine. She would listen, truly listen, to my fears about the future, and I listened to her loneliness, her sacrifices, her longing for connection. It was never about grand declarations. It was in the way she poured me tea before I asked, the way I stayed late to make her paperwork lighter. It was in the glances across the office that lingered just a second too long, the smiles that spoke more than words ever could. Late-night talks became our sanctuary. We would sit in her office with the lights dimmed, papers forgotten, just two women sharing pieces of their hearts. She confessed how hard it was to let anyone in after years of guarding herself. I confessed how lost I felt before meeting her, how she made me believe I had a place in this world. There was no physical intimacy, no need for it. Our love was stitched together through presence, care, and words that carried more weight than touch ever could. When she said, "I'm proud of you," I felt seen in a way I never had before. When I whispered, "You're not alone anymore," I saw her eyes soften with a gratitude she didn't need to speak aloud. And though doubt still lingered at times, questions about how the world might judge us, about whether we were strong enough to hold on to this, there was one thing I knew with certainty: she was no longer just my boss. She was the quiet miracle that turned my days into something worth waking up for. In her presence, I had found more than guidance, more than kindness. I had found love, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be real, the kind that lived in silence, in laughter, in the small, unshakable moments of belonging. And I knew then, as I sat across from her one late evening with a cup of tea warming my hands, that this was only the beginning of us. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had ever lived before Olivia walked into my life. Everything felt different now, not because the world outside had changed, but because she had changed the way I saw myself within it. Before her, my days were restless, without shape. I woke up with no sense of purpose, drifting through life without direction, convinced I was destined to remain unseen, unheard. But Olivia gave me more than a job, she gave me dignity. She treated me not as someone lesser, but as someone worth guiding, worth believing in. I still remember the way she would smile when I managed something small, like organizing a file system, or calming down a nervous patient. "You see," she would say softly, "you're capable of more than you know." Those words rooted themselves deep inside me. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was building something. The clinic no longer felt like just a workplace. It had become my home. The steady rhythm of patients walking in and out, the scent of antiseptic mixed with Olivia's favorite jasmine tea, the laughter we sometimes shared between hectic hours, it all gave me a sense of belonging I had never known before. Every corner of that space held a memory, a lesson she taught me, a glance we shared, a silence that spoke louder than words. And in those moments, when we sat side by side after a long day, sipping tea in the quiet of her office, I felt whole. As if every wound life had given me was slowly healing, one gentle gesture at a time. Olivia became more than my guide, she became my compass. Watching her, I began to dream again. She inspired me in ways I never thought possible. Her patience, her strength, her unshakable belief in the goodness of people, it made me want to grow, to learn, to become someone who could stand tall beside her. Sometimes, when we walked home together, I caught myself imagining things I never dared to before, traveling to places I had only seen in books, learning new skills, building a life filled with laughter and discovery. And always, Olivia was there in those dreams, her presence steady, her hand within reach. There was a kind of quiet happiness that had taken root in me, one that wasn't loud or showy, but deep, steady, and unshakable. I didn't need grand gestures to know what I meant to her, and she didn't need declarations to understand what she was to me. It was in the way she guided me gently without ever making me feel small. It was in the way I stayed late just to ease her burdens, not because she asked, but because I wanted to. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by loneliness. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, not just in a place, but in someone's heart. As I sat at my desk one quiet evening, looking at the fading light spilling across the clinic floor, I whispered to myself, this is where I was meant to be. And deep inside, I knew it was true. Olivia wasn't just a chapter in my life, she was the beginning of an entirely new book, one filled with purpose, healing, and love. I had found not only direction and dignity, but also the home my heart had been searching for all along. The day began like any other. The clinic was calm, sunlight pouring in through the tall glass windows, patients trickling in one by one. Olivia had left earlier than usual that morning, she had an appointment across town, some medical board meeting she couldn't miss. I remember teasing her before she left, saying, don't forget to come back soon. I can't run this place without you." She had smiled that knowing smile, the one that always melted me, and said, "I'll be back before you know it." But hours passed, and she didn't return. I was just finishing up the day's files when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Something inside me tightened, but I answered anyway. A calm, detached voice on the other end said words that shattered me in an instant. "Dr. Olivia has been in a car accident. Please come to the hospital." The folder slipped from my hands. Papers scattered across the floor, but I couldn't see them, my vision blurred as panic consumed me. I ran out, my body moving before my mind could process what was happening. The drive to the hospital felt endless, every red light a cruel punishment, every second stretching into eternity. My chest was heavy, my breaths shallow, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. When I finally arrived, I rushed inside, asking anyone who would listen. "Olivia. Dr. Olivia, where is she?" My voice was breaking, desperate. Nurses glanced at me with eyes filled with pity, and in that moment, I knew. A doctor walked toward me, his expression grave, his steps too slow. I shook my head before he even spoke. "No, no, please, don't say it." But he did. Softly, like a blade pressing against my skin, "We are sorry. She didn't make it." The world went silent. It felt like the ground beneath me gave way, like I had been thrown into an endless void. My breath was stolen, my chest aching with a pain I had never known before. I collapsed into the nearest chair, my hands covering my face, the sobs tearing out of me uncontrollably. The sterile smell of the hospital, the distant beeping of machines, the muffled conversations in the hallway, everything blurred into nothingness. All I could think of was her smile that morning, her promise to return, the way her hand had brushed mine the night before as we locked up the clinic together. She was gone. Just like that, she was gone. Memories flooded me in a cruel rush, her voice guiding me when I doubted myself, the warmth in her eyes when she looked at me, the way she made me feel like I belonged. She had given me everything, love, dignity, hope, and now she was ripped away from me without warning, leaving me broken and gasping in the wreckage of what we had built. I wanted to scream, to bargain, to demand the universe give her back. But there was only silence, cold and unyielding. That night, I sat alone in the waiting area long after everyone else had left, hugging myself, as if my arms could somehow replace the embrace I would never feel again. My tears wouldn't stop. My body shook until I was numb, and even then, the ache in my chest only grew heavier. Olivia was gone. The woman who taught me how to live, how to love, how to see myself with worth, she was gone. And with her, it felt as though a piece of my soul had been buried forever. The days after Olivia's death moved in slow motion. I kept going to the clinic, almost out of instinct, because that's where she had been, where her presence lingered. Patients came in, staff carried on, and life outside those walls refused to stop. But for me, every file I touched, every chair I passed, every scent of antiseptic in the air, it all screamed of her. Her office was the hardest. I would step inside and see the empty chair, the desk where she had once leaned over to explain things to me, the pen still resting where she had last left it. I remember once sitting in her chair, closing my eyes, pretending she was just down the hall, and would walk back in any moment. But when I opened them, the silence only reminded me that she never would. I lasted a few months at the clinic. I tried to pour myself into the work, to honor her by continuing what she had built, but my heart couldn't take it. Every corner was heavy with memory. The walls whispered her voice, the halls carried her footsteps. I realized I wasn't healing, I was drowning in grief. And so, with a trembling heart, I handed in my resignation. Leaving felt like losing her all over again. The day I walked out for the last time, I paused at the doorway, my hand brushing the wall. A whisper escaped my lips, "Thank you, Olivia. For everything." At home, The memories followed me. I would lie awake at night replaying our conversations, her gentle laughter, the way she would tilt her head when she was deep in thought, the softness in her eyes whenever they met mine. Her words of encouragement still echoed inside me, "You're capable, Alex. You just don't see it yet." Sometimes I would find myself smiling, only for the ache to return, reminding me that I'd never hear her say them again. I often sat by the window with my journal, writing down the little things about her that I was terrified of forgetting. The way she hummed absent-mindedly while checking reports. How she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was tired. How she once told me that loneliness was the price of a life spent caring for others, and how I wanted to be the one who ended that loneliness for her. One sentence became etched in my heart. I was not just her PA, I was the keeper of her love. She had chosen me to stand beside her, to share her days, to hold pieces of her no one else ever saw. That was a gift I carried like a fragile treasure, even as the years passed. Time moved on, as it always does. Seasons changed, people came and went, but the emptiness she left remained with me. Even years later, there were moments I found myself breaking down, clutching a photo of her, or a letter she once scribbled, my tears staining the pages. Some loves, I learned, never fade. They remain etched into your soul, unshaken by distance, unbroken by death. Olivia was gone, but she lived within me. In my choices, in my courage, in the love I carried quietly in my heart. And though I walked the world without her, I knew I would always be carrying the greatest part of her, the love we once shared, the love that made me whole. And even now, when the nights grow long and my heart aches with loneliness, I whisper into the silence, hoping somehow she can hear me. I still love you, Olivia. Always. People around me often told me the same thing, "Alex, you need to move on." They said it kindly, with gentle eyes and soft voices, but their words felt like knives. Move on. As if Olivia was just a chapter to be closed. As if love could be shelved and forgotten. They didn't understand, how could they? She wasn't just a part of my life. She was my life. My reason. My light. And though her body was gone, her presence never left me. There were days when I could almost feel her hand brushing against mine, her voice echoing in the stillness, her laughter tucked between the rustle of leaves. At night, when the world was silent, I sometimes felt as if she sat beside me, unseen but very much there, watching over me as she always had. One evening, as I was sorting through an old box of her things, papers, books, files she had left behind, I stumbled upon something I hadn't noticed before. A small leather-bound diary, tucked beneath folders, its edges worn as if it had been opened many times. My hands trembled as I picked it up. For a long while, I just stared, afraid of what I might find, afraid of reopening wounds that had barely begun to scar. But curiosity and longing won. Slowly, I opened the diary. And as my eyes traced the first lines, tears welled up. Page after page, Olivia had written about me. There's a girl who comes to the clinic. Alex. Something about her unsettles me, in the gentlest way. I don't know why, but when she smiles, I feel a warmth I haven't felt in years. My chest tightened. I turned the page. I tell myself not to get attached. She deserves someone her age, someone free, someone unburdened by the weight of responsibility. But still, I find myself waiting for her visits, just to catch a glimpse of her laughter. And then another entry. Why do I feel like the universe placed her in my path? I am terrified to admit it, even to myself, but I think I love her. I pressed the book against my heart, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. All this time, she had loved me long before she spoke the words aloud. She had carried that secret love quietly, faithfully, tenderly, just as I carried mine. The more I read, the more I realized, our love wasn't an accident. It wasn't something fleeting or fragile. It was destiny. We had found each other against all odds, and even though life had been cruel enough to take her away too soon, love had already written us into eternity. I closed the diary gently, my tears falling onto the leather cover. My grief still ached, but it no longer felt empty. Because now I knew the truth, Olivia had loved me with every piece of her soul, just as I had loved her. They say love ends with death. They say we must let go, bury our hearts, and walk away. But they are wrong. Olivia may no longer walk this earth, but she walks with me in every step, in every dream, in every beat of my heart. And so, when people tell me to move on, I smile softly, holding her words close. Because I know something they don't. They say love ends with death. But I know the truth, because every beat of my heart still whispers her name, Olivia.